Hi, I'm Mike Steven, and this is another episode of Gear Up. Today we're going to talk about watches. So watches have evolved in the last few years with technology. So watches started out as something that you could tell the time on, maybe have some date, and if you're lucky, have a light on it. From there, they've moved into fashion type pieces that are really all about style. These guys are about looking good. Yeah, it'll tell you the time, but it's mostly about something, a nice accessory on your wrist to kind of complete your outfit. So we started to get into activity trackers. Activity trackers, people have probably heard that. Activity trackers are people that want to count their steps, people that want to know how far they've gone in a day. Watches are now doing that. Back in the day, you had these guys, pedometers. You'd hook that onto your hip, and the pedometer would tell you how many steps you took in a day. These guys are still available, and they're very basic. Next up to bat, we have now activity trackers. They even make them for kids. So this activity tracker will track how many steps your kid's taking. Parents really like it because it can be paired to a smartphone. It can let you know where your kid is at. There's fun little games on it, some of them including brushing your teeth, so that you can actually set a timer on there and you get points for brushing your teeth. The activity tracker knows you're brushing your teeth because it's all GPS based. So kind of a cool little guy right there for juniors. Next up to bat, you get the person kind of walking in and saying, hey, I want something that is going to count how many steps I do, so that at the end of the day, if I just haven't done enough that day, I go out for a walk, or I do something to get my steps up to where I want because I have a focus of either losing weight or getting more healthy, any of those types of things. So activity trackers are fantastic for that. The other person that we get in all the time is somebody that needs to track their heart rate. So for example, even on this simple band here, you can actually track your heart rate. So if you have a heart condition, that's one reason why you'd want to track your heart rate. Your doctor has actually asked you to do so. The other reason is fitness orientated. Your heart doesn't lie. Your heart lets you know how good you're feeling. Sometimes you're not feeling great out on a run or a walk and you decide to slow down. Your heart actually tells you how hard you're pushing and doesn't let your emotions get involved. So heart rate's another neat feature to have on an activity tracker. As we continue kind of peeling through these activity trackers, they're going to get more and more powerful with what they can do. For example, the one that I wear is very similar to this guy here. This guy on your wrist has a heart rate monitor built into the back of it. So you can actually get your pulse all the time. Whereas a lot of heart rate trackers are using a band around your chest. So similar to that guy right there. So that band will record your heart a little bit more accurately than your wrist, but this guy does the trick. It'll let you know your heart rate at any given time. It's really neat for that, for sleep tracking, because some people have trouble sleeping and they want to know how much deep cycle sleep they're getting. This heart rate on your wrist will actually let you know how deep you're going into your sleep. They've got algorithms built into all these guys to figure out all sorts of different stuff. The other neat thing is very similar to your cell phone. You've got apps on these guys. So man, you can download all sorts of apps, anywhere from like a weather app if you just want to know what the weather's doing by looking at your phone for the forecast, right down to there's a stargazing app that you can actually put onto these things. You name it. If you can think of it, there's probably an app for it. Some of the things that I really like about this is that you can customize the face. It's a kind of a fun little app that you can customize it anywhere from Star Wars themed stuff to more activity tracker based stuff where it has all your screens right up on your watch screen so that you can see your heart rate, you can see everything that you're doing, you can see your steps, you can see all sorts of stuff. One of the ones that makes me laugh is one called Beer Tracker. It tells you how many calories you're burning and whether you're allowed a beer yet or not. So it tracks your activity by the number of beer you're allowed to drink at the end of that activity. But there is all sorts of different things that you can track. Another thing that I really love about it, when I'm cycling, I'll have it on, and if I get a text message or a phone call, I can quickly look at my watch because it's hooked to my phone, and it'll tell me who's calling, and I can decide whether I want to stop my ride or whether that phone call or that text can wait. So I really like that feature. Next up to bat, you kind of start to move into, we talked briefly about cycling. So cycling computers are kind of something that's going along with watches. Guys are using watches for example, multisport. Multisport is triathlon, if you don't know. So triathlon has 3 different components to it. It's got a swim, it's got a bike, and it's got a run. So by wearing a watch, You can track what you're doing out on the lake or in the pool. You can also track what you're doing on your bicycle, and you can track what you've done on your run. So you don't have to have 3 different computers in essence to do the 3 different sports. Everything can be compact and on your wrist. And just to show you how small things are getting, that right there is a bike computer. It has GPS location, it'll tell your elevation, it'll tell all sorts of stuff, all in this tight little package. So they don't have to be big and clunky anymore. Having said that, if you want to view a map on this, which is available, believe it or not, you can view kind of where you've gone out on a bike ride. If you want to view your data, it is a little nicer to have a slightly bigger screen, because viewing your data while you're out there, the bigger screens definitely help out with that. Most of these guys will sync up with a system when you get back home. So when you get back home, it automatically syncs into an account that you've set up, takes your walk, your ride, your run, your swim, whatever you've done, takes it, uploads it onto this platform that allows you to really take apart all sorts of different things. One time I had a really bad crash out mountain biking. I wanted to know how fast I was going when I crashed. Well, all I did is I went back to my data and I looked what my speed was the moment before I had no speed. So that told me at point of impact how much speed I was carrying with me. So there's all sorts of things that you can use to play with this data. There's this really neat, I think it's called an app, but Strava. Strava is something that people are absolutely addicted to. So when you're wearing your watch out on your bike, all of a sudden a bunch of riders might take off the front if you're riding in a group. Well, what's happening is there's what's called a Strava segment, a segment that somebody says, hey, I can ride from the bottom of this hill to the top of this hill in this amount of time. So guys are trying to beat it. And there's what's called COM, King of the Mountain. So allowing you to be the person that takes that new title. So it adds a whole nother level of competitiveness out there if you want it to be that. But again, you can just bring it back to fitness and just your own personal goals as well, recording your data. Another thing I like about it is when I look at my calendar, I see how active I've been over a month. Did I complete my steps of the day? Did I go out for an extra activity like a run, a bike, something else other than just my walking around and doing regular stuff? So I find that it gives you that extra push. If you want that extra push to be able to spend a little bit more time doing activities, I find that these activity style watches will help with that. They'll push you to do things. You also have fun with it with the other features on it. Another thing that I just want to mention is some people say, hey, you know what, some of these activity trackers can be pretty pricey. Well, there's kind of some neat options too. A lot of people don't know, but your smartphone has the ability to do a lot of this stuff with an app loaded onto it. So you take your smartphone has GPS capability, it has Bluetooth capability, it has Wi-Fi capability. So it has all these things that these watches are using. So what you can do is you can actually carry your phone and do some activity tracking with that. You can also, this is designed to be able to snap your phone on your bike or be a waterproof case for out hiking and all that kind of stuff, but you can actually snap this right onto the handlebars of your bike and take it with you out cycling. So pretty much no matter what your budget is, if you do have a smartphone already, you can get into this activity tracking kind of style of things. And that's really where watches are really being driven right now on the sports side. You've got anywhere from your fashion watches right to your high-end activity tracking, GPS capable, all that kind of Bluetooth crazy technology. Thanks for watching Gear Up. This has been Mike Stephen. Hi, I'm Mike Stephen, and this is another episode of Gear Up. Today, we're going to talk about the Enduro class mountain bike. So, a lot of people know what a downhill bike is. A lot of people know what a cross-country bike is. Enduro is somewhere in the middle there, probably a lot closer to the downhill spectrum as opposed to the cross-country spectrum. So, people have been asking for quite some time, is there a bike that I can jump off things, ride aggressive downhill trails, but I can still pedal it? It doesn't ride like a big couch on wheels. The Enduro class bike has finally come, and yes, it does solve those things. I'm an ex-downhiller. I don't even own a downhill bike anymore because I just don't get out often enough to a resort where I'm riding a chairlift all the time. If I get out there the odd time, my Enduro class bike totally covers me on the mountain there. The only time that you're going to want something more than an enduro class bike on a ski hill or a resort is if you're racing. If you're competing, yes, a full downhill rig is going to make it through those rough, chattery, chundery sections a lot faster. But let's get back to enduro. So enduro gives you the ability to pedal up the hills and descend down the hills. So how well does it pedal up the hills? You know what? For most people, they're going to be very, very happy with this platform unless they're racing again on the cross-country side of things. If they're racing on the cross-country side of things, this bike is going to be a little too fat and a little too slow. But for your average rider, man, this thing pedals quite well up to the tops of the hills, but its forte is most definitely coming down. I'm going to explain the format of enduro racing so that you understand why this bike is built the way it's built. You'll have 4 to 5 descents in your average enduro race. You have to be self-propelled to the tops of the descents, meaning you have to ride your bike to the top of the mountain. With a downhill bike, that's just not possible. They do not pedal up hills, whereas an enduro class bike pedals up hills quite happily. Most formats allow you a certain cutoff time to get to the top, and as long as you reach that cutoff time, your downhill scores are not penalized. So basically how you win an enduro is the sum total of your 5 descents being the lowest number. So in essence, being the fastest guy on the descents. So it's like a multi-stage downhill that you have to get yourself to the top of. So the reason why this format is so popular right now is it allows you to have a bike that you can pedal around in the forest and isn't just so specialized in terms of riding at a resort or shuttling it out of the back of a pickup truck. So let's get into the bike. Let's talk about a few of the things in the bike that make it so good for enduro. In the back of an enduro class bike, you're going to have 6 to 7 inches of travel. That's very similar to a downhill bike. Downhill bikes might have an inch, inch and a half more, but that's really close to the downhill travel. The reason why it's not so difficult to pedal is it doesn't have the extra beefiness built into it, and it's got a much bigger cog stack in the back, allowing you to climb up hills much more efficiently. The other thing is the angulation in the travel. So how the shock moves through its travel is much more efficient for climbing. Not quite as efficient for descending, but man, it's close. So this bike is very capable in the back end of the bike. When you move to the front end of the bike, you've got a 15 or a 20 mil axle in the front of a bike on most enduro class bikes. Oversized stanchions. This is a 36 mil stanchion, which is quite common on downhill forks actually to be running that same size. And again, you're running that 6 to 7 inches of travel up in the front end of the bike. So 6 to 7 inches of travel means you can come through a rock garden with boulders yay size at pretty high speeds and allow the suspension to eat those boulders as you work through that part of the course. So the focus obviously on this, because the part that's timed and makes you win, is the downhill. So this bike is extremely fast on the downhill. It's extremely supple and plush. A lot of the bikes in the enduro class have the ability to flick a switch between climb and descend. So what that does to the rear suspension of the bike, so when you're in climb mode, you're much more efficient. The suspension is a little bit more rigid and allows you to climb more efficiently. You pop it forward and you get into the plushness of the ride. Just how smooth the bike moves through the travel and soaks up all those bumps, really edges into corners and allows you to accelerate through a corner instead of being a little terrified all the way through the process. Next up to bat, we're going to talk about a couple things that most enduro riders are doing to their bike. One is tubeless. So most bike tires run a tube inside of them. Enduro riders will take that tube out very quickly. They want to run lower air pressure, and one way to do it is to convert your bike to tubeless. Converting your bike to tubeless is actually quite inexpensive these days. It's not near as expensive as it used to be in the past. So a lot of riders are doing it for enduro or even for cross country or all mountain riding. The benefit of going tubeless, you don't pinch flat your tire. So when you hit that hard rock, you don't flat your tube between the rock and your rim. There is no tube in there. The other thing is that you run a solution in the tires, and this solution is able to fill most of your slashes and gouges that you might incur on a downhill lap. The benefit of that is obviously finishing the race. you have that fluid in there, it seals that. You're not sitting on the side of the trail repairing your tube. You make it right to the finish line, and a lot of times you don't even know that you've incurred a flat. The tubeless system seals it that quick and continues you on your ride. Having talked about that, with tubeless and with enduro riding, one of the things that the riders are going to be paying very, very close attention to is their tire pressure. I recommend this for any rider, is to maintain and watch your tire pressure. Lower air pressure gives you more grip, traction, and handleability of the bike. Higher air pressure protects you from bottoming out your tire and hitting your rim, or if you're running tubes, pinch flatting. So you've got to find that balance between that high speed suppleness of a low air pressure tire and the firm enough air pressure that you're not tearing tires off the rims or getting a flat with a tube. So tire pressure is really important to maintain. I find the two major factors that dictate your tire pressure is the rider's weight and the rider's aggressiveness level. I guess I'd also say the aggressiveness of the terrain that he's also in would vary depending on the tire pressure. Next up to bat, we are going to talk about the suspension. You've got this fancy suspension sitting on this bike. You can see that there's no coil over this, or metal coil. Coils are really heavy and they're not fun to pedal up hills. Downhill bikes have those because that's what gets you that little bit plusher travel. But this thing's air adjustable, which is really cool. So you can dial this shock in exactly to your rider's weight. Whether you'll be a 100-pound rider or 200-pound rider, you can dial the shock in perfectly for your weight. And what perfect is in the enduro world is probably you're going to set your sag to roughly about 30%. So that means when you sit on the bike, roughly 30% of your travel is used just by you sitting on the bike. What that allows your bike to do is that you've got holes in the course. So you're hitting bumps and you've also got holes. When you hit bumps, you want your suspension to absorb that. But also, when you go over a hole, you want your suspension to extend into the hole. So that's why you're running roughly that 30% sag. So 30% of your travel of your suspension is gone just by you sitting on the bike so that it can reach out in those hole scenarios. Same on the front end of the bike. You can adjust that with air pressure. And your shocks to do that are really simple. They're really small. You're probably not going to carry it with you. You're probably going to set it up back at home for what you're doing, and then you're going to leave it. Things that you will carry with you on the trail are something for a flat, because if you do get one flat, you still want to continue on. Enduro riders don't like to wear like backpacks or hydration packs. They like to throw a water bottle on to keep some water, and they like to keep the weight low on the bike because it makes the bike handle better versus up on their back where the backpack can pull them around in the corners and over the rough sections. So they've come up with all sorts of ingenious ways of being able to stock the tools that you need for your ride if the ride does go a little south right on the bike, and also keeping them nice and low on the bike. This is called a tube spool. You've got your pump, you've got a tire lever, you wrap the tube around the spool, and you attach it down onto your frame. So that basically gives you everything you need to change a tube. Or if you are running tubeless, you're still going to carry a tube with you. If you do slash a sidewall, you can put a tube in and rescue the ride. This guy right here is your hydration, but it also, on the underneath of it, has a port for a tool. So this is able to adjust something, tighten something. If something broke, a lot of times you can Mickey Mouse it back together to finish the ride with a simple tool like that. The other common thing that happens out in the mountain biking world is a broken chain. This is a chain tool that actually inserts into your top cap. You pull your top cap off, you put the chain tool in there. The tool is always with you on a bike ride. The other thing is the tool also has a place on the very top of it to be able to store a master link so that you can cut out the damaged pieces of chain and attach it with a master link. Really fast, it'll get you back on the trail. So those are the few of the accessories that enduro riders are using. Let's get into some of the safety stuff. Enduro riders are going to be wearing full face helmets. They're coming through really aggressive terrain. Like I say, most downhill riders would be happy to be riding an enduro class trail. No problem. They're very aggressive. They got steep, rocky sections. They've got all the stuff that you'd expect out of that kind of adrenaline class biking. So a full face helmet is super smart. I'm going to touch on carbon fiber really quickly here. Carbon fiber is one of those materials that absorbs impact really well. Yes, the Enduro riders like carbon fiber because it's lightweight, it's light on their head, but the big reason why they're wearing them is because it absorbs more of an impact than fiberglass or plastic. So it's actually a safer helmet to be wearing. So that goes over your helmets. Guys are going to be wearing various types of padding. Again, you've got to pedal up with this padding, so it's this tough line of how much armor do you wear on the climb for the descent. So you've got to decide that for yourself. Some people are wearing quite a bit of armor, some people are wearing very little. One of the neat technologies in armor that I'm just going to briefly also go over is D3O. D3O is a type of foam that as it gets impacted, it actually gets harder when it's impacted. So it's soft and supple, molds around your body, but as energy is transmitted into it, it actually firms up and feels more like plate armor at that point. So you get the benefit of really supple armor, but when the big impact does happen, you've got a lot of protection out of anything with this D3O material. The last thing I'm going to go over is a really unique way to store maybe all of these things right on the bike. This company has actually integrated right into the down tube of a bicycle a storage compartment. This is where your water bottle would go. If you had that SWAT tool on there that I showed you originally, it would be sitting just below here. But just by flicking this open and opening this cage, you are now able to utilize this entire tube to be able to put your gear, your nutrition, whatever you need for your ride. Thus, again, getting rid of that backpack on there that's kind of washing you out in corners and not feeling nice. And let's face it, if you can have jersey ripple on a ride, when you're going nice and fast down a trail and you can feel the jersey rippling on your back, that's a pretty good feeling. So your bike becomes some cargo space. You know what? This has been another edition of Gear Up. I'm Mike Stephen. Thanks for watching.